But the thing is what I realized with all of my journey is it's not about becoming more. It's actually about letting go of all of the really dense energy that I've piled up through
Mhm.
my entire life since my childhood, and that I've not went enough to go see it and heal it. And so I cannot bring in more new things about spirituality, about, modalities, like whatever it is. I cannot put that on top of my poop inside of me. I need to
Yep.
release a lot. And once it's released, the funniest thing is that you don't really need to go and chase these things. You don't need them anymore. The reason why people chase retreats, chase certifications and being the healers and whatever, and I'm not judging any of it, but a lot of it is because they have a void within them, and they're
Mhm.
really trying to just fill this void that they're not really looking at a really, really deeper level.
Unleash the untapped potential within you as we dive fearlessly into the realms of healing, personal growth, self love, and uncharted territories of the human experience. Join us as we navigate relationships, conquer career and business milestones, and explore the depths of spirituality. This isn't just a podcast, it's a manifesto for the resilient, the ambitious, the soul searching women and men of today. Grab your coffee and let's dive in with Beyond the Surface. Welcome back to another episode here on Beyond the Surface. And today's episode, you are in for a beautiful treat. I am sitting down with Ellie, and we are diving into a incredible conversation about the connection to our higher self and to our truth, and how that is such an integral part to who we are as creatives and artists. There are so many beautiful similarities on our journey and on our paths, but she is also here to share a little bit about her book, her latest book, Letters from You to You. So let's dive in. I feel like we're just in for such a potent conversation talking about your book and your experience and your journey with that. But the place that I kind of want to start, because I know this is something important to you and that you wanted to talk about, is around our truth and knowing our truth. And so I'm kind of curious, with your experience, why has how has knowing your truth and like understanding your truth been so pivotal for you and your journey and where you're at?
Well, I grew up I would say, in an environment where I could not be in my truth. I was the youngest of three, and I always felt like I was left behind.
Hmm.
I also experienced a lot of like solitude when I was younger. I had a hard time connecting with friends, and I was very, very not good in school as well. And it's funny because I had kind of like a realization really not too long ago that my biggest childhood trauma was school. It's insane. And so, yeah, so I wasn't being able to be in my truth when I was younger because I felt small. And I felt
Hmm.
small for a really, really long time, even like being in my adulthood, because I didn't know who I was. And it was only when I got into the beginning of my 20s, I had an awakening. One of my friends committed suicide, and that was a big shock to me. And it was the first time I was kind of losing someone that I knew well, except for like
Yeah.
my grandfather. But even my grandfather, I was super young when he had passed away. But now it's kind of like I had the maturity to understand a little bit more, and also to be very curious as to what is going on. Like, what does this mean when someone dies? Where are they going? And so there was a kind of like a weird sensation of I'm sad, I'm confused, and I'm also very curious about my own life, and who am
Hmm.
I as a person? Because like was so random, or it wasn't really random in the sense of spirituals if we look at the spiritual world, but
Yeah.
like I really needed to discover this journey of spirituality, and I was like 21, and it was not common back then to have like people that young to kind of be old souls and go into this, field. And
Yeah.
now I'm 37, just to give you guys a perspective. So it's like 16 years ago, and yeah, I wasn't. I know that I was not in my truth all of my teenage years, and it caused a lot of trauma within me. And so going into that spirituality, it really opened me up completely to, yeah, to discover like who am I, like to my
Mm.
core. And I delve into like spiritual books and self-development books, and I was like, I really was not good in school, and like suddenly now I wanted to read books. So it was kind of like, okay, now I'm interesting in something, interesting in learning, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
understood the difference between the thing, in school. It wasn't that I wasn't interested in school, is that it was just not stimulating me because
Mm-hmm.
of who I was, and that I didn't know that I was. School was not stimulating me. So it's not that I wasn't good, it's just that I wasn't stimulated to learn. Because today I can tell you that I'm very smart, and I used to not think that I was smart for a very long time. So yeah, being in all of that made it so that I became an entrepreneur. And if it wasn't for all of that, I don't believe that I would have stayed an entrepreneur and developed even more my truth within me, with my challenges and everything. And so when you go through a lot of challenges, I don't know if you're an entrepreneur, but when you go through a lot of challenges as an entrepreneur, it's like I don't even understand people that are entrepreneurs and are not connected to something higher. They're not connecting
That's so
to their
true.
truth. Because how can
Yeah.
you build this resilience? How can you continue to go
Mm-hmm.
on when you're failing, or so yeah, I believe that it started at a very young age, and I was just not aware of it. And then at one point, I was like, okay, I really want to, this is my priority. This is what I
Yeah.
thought.
I'm kind of just amazed in ways. It's just so interesting that, and I'm such a, I don't know, you'll understand me when I say this, but I have these moments where I'm kind of just like, damn, our guides were conspiring up there to bring us together to have this conversation, because there's just so much similarities and just
Wow.
parallels in my own journey. Just listening to you, I started very young, entered into the personal development world. I was also 19, 20 when I was entered
Yeah.
into this world. And so, right? And it felt like, I don't know if you've ever watched the movie Narnia, but I kind of describe it as like you walk through that wardrobe, and it was like this whole other world. And very similarly, I felt throughout my childhood disconnected from who I was. And yet at the same time, I guess more so when I started personal development, it became this like almost like this internal inner quest of like, who am I? And what am I here to do in this world? Right. And again, very similarly, I also experienced a death at a very young age. And that also was a big catalyst for me in the sense that it got me thinking of just and I was more so 13, 14. So still at that point, I was like, I can't understand. I can't wrap my brain around this person's just never going to be here again.
Mm.
So many years later, death has taught me so much about life, of living, of just how crucial it is for us to be able to actually live in our truth and to understand what that is. Because when we're so disconnected, I don't know, there's just like, it's like, what does life even mean when you're so disconnected from yourself? And I totally agree. Like, as a business owner, there has to be some sort of connection, because there's so many moments where there's lows, right? We're going to experience that, like, we're going to be in the trial of it all. And it's like,
And
what keeps you
uncertainty
going? Yeah. Like
all the time.
constant. Well, yeah. I feel like we end up, it's always a cycle, right? You are in the uncertainty, and then you kind of have the breakthrough, and then there's a little bit of clarity, and then you reach back to the uncertainty again. But that actually, you know what, that actually kind of prompted me with a question that I was thinking about when I was hearing you explain or just talk a little bit, is with your, like, your experience with your own truth. Do you find that you've experienced that as well, of just like this certainty and this conviction of, I know who I am and I know where I'm going and I know my truth, and then are there moments in time where you experience a little bit of that disconnect from your truth? And I'm just curious, like, if you experience that, and if so, like, what does that look like for you? How do you navigate those periods in your life too?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that there's like levels of awareness for sure, and you start on the spiritual journey anyways from my perspective and from my experience, personal experience. Like when I started the spiritual journey, I was, first of all, I was young, and also I was very curious. So I feel like I was at a curious kind of stage in my life where everything was just like, oh my God, this is beautiful. And I want to continue to understand more. And I was eating it, right? And reading and listening to like speakers and spiritual leaders and just like filling my consciousness of like a lot of information and going from
Mhm.
philosophy to like psychological things and also spiritual things and just mixing everything up, but kind of like finding myself through all of that. And not that I was lost at one point, but I was still not understanding, I think how to integrate it. Like I didn't have the maturity
Mm.
yet to integrate it well. And you know life will bring you events for you to grow really, really quickly when you are ready to grow. If you're not doing it yourself because you're stubborn and you're too much in your, maybe your spiritual ego, because that is a thing when you start. Unfortunately, most people that start spirituality, they are, because they're curious and they want to go in really deeply, they develop that spiritual ego, unfortunately,
Mm.
and they think that because they read all the books and they have all of this knowledge, that, oh my God, they know so much more than a lot of people, and they know where they're going, so they know their truth and their conviction. Yeah, been there my entire 20s. And then when I got, and I'm going to say this very nicely, but when shit hit the fan when I was 30 and I lost everything, now
Mm.
was my real spiritual growth.
Oof.
All of the knowledge that I gained in my 20s, and thinking that, yes, okay, and I even like wrote my first book when I was 27. So it is not that I was not having the right information. It was mostly that I didn't have enough, I would say, life experience of kind of like hitting rock bottom to really know how to integrate all of this spiritual things, like all of the spiritual things that I was learning about. And so when I hit 30 and that happened, I lost my marriage, I lost my business, I lost my two dogs, and I lost my
Wow.
house. So I basically, I was nothing. I
Yeah.
felt like I was nothing as well. And I needed
Mm.
to start from scratch, and I was completely on survival mode. And so, and when I speak of like different levels of, I guess, spiritual maybe awakenings and surrendering to kind of your truth and another truth, like it
Yeah.
happens to you a lot of the times because life is doing that for you, and we think that it happens to us, but really it happens for us, right? And you get to the point where, yeah, you have no idea what is your truth, because now you have to figure out your life through another level. But it's just making you a lot wiser. And in the moment, it doesn't feel like that. Like seriously, I remember like I was in shock and like my life was technically over. But it didn't take me a long time, that I, because of the wisdom that I kind of gained, in the sense where all of the knowledge that I understood, it didn't take me a long time that within all of that trauma and that stress, I could really just let go and be super present and kind of like understand another perspective, and go into a little bit more of a witness consciousness. But still, even though I was starting to do that, it didn't mean that I wasn't. integrating it right away. Like I needed to learn a lot more lessons of experiences of other loss and other levels of loss as well to get to a point where I am today, where there is literally peace that got installed within me, which is another really deeper truth. And that, you know, and again, like I'm 37 and I have that truth. My truth might change in about a couple of years. And now I see how it fluctuates so quickly, and how I have to adapt really, really quickly, and how living from the perspective of witness consciousness is a lot more easier than it used to be, because I went through my healing journey like big time. But
Yeah.
yeah, I believe that my truth changed. It changes a lot, and I feel that that is normal. We can't always just be fixed on one thing and we say like, oh, this is me,
Mm,
and I'm always going to feel think this way, because now you're
yeah.
just, that's your ego. You're not even spiritual at this point in that sense, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's life, right? And I think that's the whole piece around us always evolving and accepting that piece. I
Yeah.
don't know if the word is accepting, or I don't know if surrendering is the word for it, but I think it's just, I think there has to be around a piece of acceptance that
Yeah.
this is life. There's going to be periods, and our truth is going to constantly evolve because we are going to constantly evolve.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
hell, I want to be on that train where I am
Yeah.
constantly changing. Like, right? Because I know it's so cliche in a way to talk about how, if you're like stuck or whatever, you're not growing. There's that whole quote around that too. But what you just speaking about actually reminded me of this quote that I literally like just wrote down. It's from one of my favorite authors, Paulo Coelho. And
Yeah,
he
that
just
rings a
talks
bell.
about how like the journey isn't so much about becoming anything.
Hmm.
Maybe it's about unbecoming
Yes,
everything that isn't really
absolutely.
you, so you can be who you were meant to be in the first place. Like I feel
Yeah,
like that just, that's the
it is.
essence of life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Of our
and
journeys.
we don't always understand it that way at the beginning, because we believe that we need to become something more than what we actually
Mhm.
are, because we're not enough, right? We do not feel enough for a long time. So what we're doing, and what I've noticed, and it's still like this today, and at one point I'm thinking it might change, because we won't have a choice, because right now I feel like the entire planet is kind of putting us in a dark night of the soul, and we kind of, this is our awakening for everyone, right? So it's kind of like, hey, you know what, if you want to continue to keep up with me, you better wake up, and so, but
Yeah.
what I realize is like, going into the spiritual journey at the beginning, there is a lot of things that is said, and or at least that was said back when I was in my 20s. I don't know if it's still like that today. I'm imagining there's still some things like that, but where it would be like, do this and you'll feel better, do that and you'll feel better, do that, oh, this is a
Mhm.
good modality, you should do that modality, so then you can integrate that inside of you. But the thing is what I realized with all of my journey is,
Mhm.
it's not about becoming more. It's actually about letting go of all of the really dense energy that I've piled up
Mhm.
through my entire life since my childhood, and that I've not went enough to go see it and heal it. And so I cannot bring in more new things about spirituality, modalities, like whatever it is. I cannot put that on top of my poop inside of me. I need to
Yep.
release a lot, and once it's released, the funniest thing is that you don't really need to go and chase these things. You don't need them anymore. The reason why people chase retreats, chase certifications and being the healers and whatever, and I'm not judging any of it, but a lot of it is because they have a void within them, and they're
Mhm.
really trying to just fill this void that they're not really looking at a really, really deeper level. They're not healing that, all of the dense energy. So they just want to grab onto whatever that will make them feel like they're actually doing some work on themselves, right? But the real work,
Mhm.
in my perspective, is when you can sit, be quiet with yourself, let all of the shit come up, and then deal with it and see where it comes from. And once you do that, as much as it's hard and it's painful, it's very simple. That's the thing, right? It's not about,
Hmm.
I feel that it could become very complicated to try to become always more. But when you understand
Mm-hmm.
that you have to come to the core of who you are, and that means nothing outside of you. No
Yeah.
cards, no retreats, no million coaches that are going to give you 1,000 of advices. And I'm not saying they're not good, but it's just a lot of information when there's so much inside us screaming at you to say, hey, you need to look at this and you need to feel this
Mm-hmm.
completely and know that that's not you, but I'm still in here and I'm screaming to be looked at. And then when you
Oh,
do that, you gain peace. And then you see, wow, spirituality is very simple. And I've been complicating my life for so long by looking outside of myself to get more, to be stimulated more, to get to know something different than you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, this is where I'm at now in my life, but it is quite a journey, and it's not, it's not easy. So it's
mm,
okay that people do that. It's just at one point you realize you don't really need all of that anymore. You can just go inside and be at peace.
yeah. My one of my like dear friends, and also she's a mentor to me as well in ways. I was just listening to her share something today, and she shared how, those moments of going within our hearts, and that stillness that we create and we go in, like those are the moments where there's such deep appreciation and gratitude. And I resonate so deeply with everything that you are sharing in this moment, because I've made that very conscious decision, especially this year, but I would even say, yeah, like this year, I would say mainly, where it was, all right, like we're shutting out the noise right now.
Yeah.
We're shutting out the noise, and I'm simply like, it's me, and it's this connection right now. It's me, my higher self, and that's what we're connecting with. And I think what happens is sometimes it's like this impatience that happens because we want the answers. We
Yeah,
we want the answers right away, and
absolutely.
sometimes you're not quite ready for the answer, and that's
No,
why it takes a
no, you're not.
little bit longer, right? And it
Yeah,
takes a little bit longer when you're really just sitting with yourself, because it's like this interesting dance of like a little piece, a little clarity, a little piece to the puzzle. And then it's to go out and to live, to be. And then again, another layer unfolds.
yeah,
And like you said, it's such a simple thing. And what I wanted to also kind of offer in the thing, because I find that when you have this period in this space where you really spend time knowing yourself and understanding yourself, and you shut out the noise and you let go of all this need for these certifications, or you understand this root cause and you actually do the work to heal that part that feels like they're not good enough. Because I totally relate, like I totally agree, and I also relate. I've done the things of checking off the getting the certifications, doing the things again, check check check, like writing the book and doing the speaking, and again it wasn't coming from this place of like deep fulfillment. It was like, let me just add all these layers and all these certifications and all these things that I've done to make it appear of this persona. And yet at the core and at the truth, like I'm okay, I'm enough as it is.
yeah, as it is.
But what's interesting though is then once you kind of peel back all these layers and now there's this stillness, then you can actually listen and hear and almost be able to hear the calling, or hear or
Yeah,
feel that knowing of, this is the, for example, the modality that I am meant to learn to master. That was like an experience for me when it came down to becoming a cacao ceremonialist. Like for me, and it's interesting, at periods of time, I was like, maybe Reiki or maybe this. And I was like, in the stillness, what
yeah,
makes the most sense is this one medicine. And again, it's in that stillness that's where you begin to hear. And then you also get to understand, especially as running a business, as being someone who's creative, then again, the noise, and you get to create this focus and this intentionality behind your work.
Oh yeah, it's so important. And like, hats off to you for doing that as well, because I do believe that every entrepreneur out there should be able to understand that to make a good decision as to what they want to do, whatever next step that they have to do, is how can you not be in your alignment before you make those decisions, right? Because you're going to be putting effort out there for absolutely nothing, wasting so much energy and
Mm-hmm.
just like having all of these ideas. Oh yes, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. Yes, but what is in alignment with you? You know, what
Mm-hmm.
is in alignment as well, not just with you, but what is in alignment as well for the whole? How are you serving? And it makes sense to you, and you're not
Yeah.
overcomplicating things, you know, and you know that that gift that you have that is, you know, that's the same thing with my writing. It took me a long time to realize, like, okay, no, I'm a writer. I should stick to that. But
Mm-hmm.
like, when you have the ability to have something within you, you know that that's what it is. And yes, you have to be patient, but you have to have trust that, you know, if you didn't have that gift, I mean, then what is it? Like, what else would you be
Yeah.
really doing to help other people? You're literally just wasting energy all the time in that sense, you know. And that's what I realized with my the last year that I've been through, because I've let go of a business that was not calling me anymore, and being in stillness and in
Mm-hmm.
alignment and receiving the book that I wrote, like, that was a big surprise to me. But I needed to really be focused at letting go, surrendering completely to the unknown, to be in that state where I could receive that I even had a second book to write, you know? So absolutely, like, alignment first. That's always what I say.
Yeah. Well, you said too, like I guess you're saying that the book was a surprise for you. I'm curious. Um, I'm curious about like how you see this connection to our like self, right? Like self, capital S, in relation to your art, right? Like in writing is your art. How do you see that connection? Or how
Well,
you experience that connection?
I've been writing since I was 15 years old, and I was writing songs when I started writing because I'm also a singer, and so I started writing songs to play guitar and just compose songs, right? But I didn't know that the deeper kind of meaning of my writing was actually me expressing myself, just me
Mm,
being me on paper. And so when I
yeah.
started my spiritual journey, it kind of like shifted where I started just journaling, because I didn't used to journal all that much. I used to just write songs and express myself that way. But still, it's a cool skill to have when you're 15 years old to be able to express yourself that way. But you don't have the same, what I kind of noticed is that you don't have the same flexibility in the sense where, or freedom. When you're writing a song, you have to think about, okay, well, it needs to rhyme and it needs to have a melody that's going
Mm,
to go with that song. And so there's a lot of
like
parts to it
rules.
where you're not as free as when you just write in a journal and just write what the hell you want to write, you know? So I was a bit
Mm,
restricted in that sense where I was very a perfectionist. And I was looking at my writing and my songs too. And I was like being hard on myself more because I was like, no, this doesn't make sense. Like, this could be a better word. So you become kind of like more in your head. But when I started to read a lot more, it really ignited something within me. I wanted to write down my thoughts. I wanted to
mm,
explore my monologue inside of my head on paper. What did I think about the book that I just read, or even just the chapter that I just read? I wanted to kind of just dive into myself with paper and pen, you know? And so I started I started my writing with journaling, and it became a therapy. And then it came into a book. And then the last book that I wrote was, and it was 10 years later, right? From the book that I wrote when I was 27. This last one was last year, and I was not expecting it. And the connection that is with my writing is because it is completely downloaded. It is super direct. Like,
mm.
I sat down, I didn't even know what I was going to write. I just had that intuition in a meditation. I had a clear insight that I had another book to write, and the title was clear. And the way that I was going to
Yeah.
write the book was also very clear, which was a very unique concept. My book is composed of 21 letters. So they're not chapters, they're all letters. And they're letters written from the perspective of your higher self. So it's really cool. Although I sit down and like, okay, what do I do with this? Like, this is a cool concept, but I guess I
Mm.
need to be very imaginative, I guess. And so I sat down, started to write my intro, and then it just first letter came and it's like, there you go. You know what to say. And I just started. And I kind of knew that it wasn't really me. So it was a really, really intuitive experience and a very emotional experience as well, because I was rereading my letters after and bawling. Like I was like, I can't believe
Wow.
I just wrote this. Like this is me? Like what the hell? And when I
Yeah.
knew that this book was so important, but I couldn't be the like I couldn't be in my ego to try to control where it would go. It was kind of like a big surrender because I'm like, okay, this is a co-creation. Absolutely. This is not me just having this dream of writing a second book. You know, I have been there, done that with the identifying with the like I'm an author and I wrote a book. No,
Yep.
that was like bigger. It was just bigger. And I'm like, okay, I'm writing this, letting it go and see where it's gonna go. And it just it's crazy. It's crazy how it brought me so much clarity as to when you are super still and you know that you're bigger than all of your circumstances, and so you're just letting life come through you, then nothing belongs to you, and you need to trust that you do have this kind of energy that is always there to show you what's the next step. You know, you don't have to make so much effort. It's there. Just listen. It's all within you. So
Yeah.
this is how it got created, and it was a fantastic, experience. And it's always changing because now it's like it's out there. Now I'm talking about it, and I'm also like I don't want to be attached to the outcome of what it's creating, but I want it to be in a lot of people's hands for sure because I know the importance of the content that's inside and the message that I receive. But it's kind of always like I have to watch my ego with this, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. And not to say, because I understand, like, we want our art to have a stage and it to be in the right hands.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I think it just depends on some of our. So I'm talking from the perspective as like creatives, right? We're constantly going to be birthing new things. Like, although right now your focus is this new book, you're going to birth something else after this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Something else is going to come, and as creatives, we're going to constantly have this thing that we're going to birth. And sometimes it's going to be about what happens after we birth it, and then sometimes it's about the birthing process.
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
and I think we just constantly have to trust whatever that is,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not be in this space of trying to force it to be something. And I use that perspective from the lens of like my first book. It has nothing to do with how many people purchase it, and to be honest, I don't even promote it.
Hmm.
But it was such an experience for me. It was
Yeah,
so
for sure.
liberating for me to write the book, to go on that journey. It was for me, and we're going to have these projects and these things that we birth into the world that are going to be for you, and then there's going to be others that are going to be for the collective, for the world. And trusting whatever that is meant to be, because you might not know in the moment. It's kind of like, afterwards, then the pieces are going to all make sense afterwards. But
Absolutely.
I actually really love too, like, your this conviction and this the connection that you have to the trust to, kind of like source, right? And we all, that looks differently to all of us, whatever that looks like to you, but it seems like there is this connection. And so, and I'm curious from the lens of like those that are listening to this that are artists in ways, and I know sometimes people don't always identify as an artist, but newsflash, if you are a writer, if you are a singer, if Like we are all
All artists.
artists. We are all
Yeah,
creatives. If you own a business, you are a creative. You are creating something out of nothing. I'm having this
exactly.
conversations recently, and we are all creatives. You are all artists. And so I know that sometimes there's these periods where it almost feels like we're a little stagnant or maybe a little stuck. And I think there's this, it comes down to this disconnect. And so I'm curious, like, especially when you were writing this second book, what supported this connection to be able to kind of like sit down and just for it to flow through you? What supported you for that? Or any piece or insights?
Well, first of all, I had a lot of time. So I always had a really great relationship with time. And it's always been very important to me to have a lot of time and freedom in that sense. So having had that time, I could, really discipline myself as to I am just going to write as much as I can because now I am in the flow and I want to stay
Mm,
in the flow and I don't want to be forced to. Felt like I was, you know, kind of being a little bit stagnant. I knew that I would have to go and meditate. It was kind of like
mm,
I'm meditating or I'm writing,
yeah.
one or the other. Because if I wanted to really focus on this book and make this book as authentic as I could and not, just like I didn't want this book to be, I really wanted to let it flow the way that it was supposed to come out. And I didn't want to control it with my ego, where sometimes people that write books, especially because it's our personal experiences, we're going to be looking at our what we've written down and we're going to be like, oh my god, I can't say that, like what are people going to think? And then you go into that monologue and you just erase everything you just written because you feel like it's not good enough or you can't say that, whatever. Mine was so different because it's from the perspective of your inner being or higher self.
Hmm.
Literally anything that was on that paper, I could not say like, "Oh my god, I can't say that," because I'm like, "Oh, but it's not me." Like it's really people
Yeah.
know that when they're reading the book, they know that it's not Ellie telling
Mm,
them this information. It's their higher self that are telling them. So the direct approach and the, maybe provocative approach as well is kind of like perfect because I wanted people to be triggered by themselves. It's kind of like, yay.
mm.
And so that was such a really fun experience. And it kept me in the flow very, very well. Like, I didn't have a lot of stagnant moments, to be honest with you, when I wrote that book. I
Mm.
wrote it in a month. So it was just
Wow.
really, really a fun
Wow.
experience and a very emotional one because I was also triggered, to be honest. Like at times when I would reread it, I'm
Yeah.
like, it's coming to get me. And I would have to, I had releases while I was writing that book. So it was just so cool. So
Wow.
I was
Yeah.
thinking to myself, if I had releases, I know that people that are going to read it are also going to have releases. So no, I've never experienced something like that. And I do believe that that was my most profound spiritual experience as far writing the book.
Wow. I love that. And I feel like what I just kind of see is just how it's like putting yourself, like your actual physical mind, off to the side, right? And letting higher self take the wheel and, or take the pen, take the fingers, and just move and go. And that's such a intentional thing. And it's interesting. I feel like as creatives, it's kind of like catching yourself in those moments where you are judging yourself, shaming yourself, but more, I think it's like the judgment of like, this sounds whatever, and we're immediately judging our art as we're in our art. And it's like,
Yeah,
this is supposed to be like
yeah, it goes against.
beauty, right? Like, right? It's just, it's such an interesting dynamic that we create for in ourselves. And it's funny because I mean, I'm, when it comes to like writing is kind of like that art for me as well, writing and speaking. But I have the problem of like, I can't delete anything because I'm like, I might need this somewhere.
Yeah,
And we just
absolutely.
keep it, right? We always just kind of like, we move it somewhere else. But yeah,
Yes.
like I think important for us to, I don't want to say for us, I don't want to speak for people, but I think one of the things that I've tried for myself is when I'm in that flow of writing and things aren't just naturally coming and it's kind of like it feels forced or I'm judging and I'm just, that's actually this beautiful opportunity you talked about, like stepping away and going into meditating. And I think we all need to understand what those things are that we can do for ourselves. And this is what I mean, especially as someone who supports authors and writers, like to bring their books out into the world. The writing of the book is so much more beyond than just sitting at our computer or with our pen and
Hmm.
writing.
Oh yeah, for
The
sure.
book is not only being written there, the book gets written in through the conversations that you have, because something in a conversation sparks something, or you're on a walk and you have this clarity that comes through. You're in the shower, right? The inspiration comes
Yeah,
because you're not thinking about it, you're not judging it. And in those moments, sometimes you do have to walk away from the computer, the paper, whatever it is. You
yeah, to
have to
get
walk
that.
away. You have to. Exactly. And yet we force ourselves to sit there. And then we're in this like downward spiral of just like, why can't I write this book? And I
Hmm.
suck
Hmm.
and I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not meant to write. Like, you're creating the loop for yourself. You're creating this resistance for yourself. And it's catching ourselves in those moments so that we don't go down these spirals that are not productive and
Yeah,
actually have no truth.
no.
The talks and the thoughts of like, I'm not good, have no truth unless you decide to make it mean something more than it is.
Yeah, I feel like for me, if writing becomes kind of a job, then
Mm,
I'm not gonna write. It's like
mm,
I need to feel it where it's just very natural, and I'm just in my happy place when I'm writing something. If I start feeling like I need to put any effort whatsoever in my writing, I'm like, okay, that's a sign. I just have to go and reconnect and get back into my stillness and just let whatever come to me, because sometimes I don't even have any insights. It's just the matter of like stepping back, like you said, and just going back into just simplicity. You come back and I come back in front of my computer and I'm just like, okay, I got it then. Like I can continue now, you know. But for sure, you
yeah.
need rest and you need breaks. Like me,
Mm,
my 1 month of writing was pretty intense, but like I said, I had a lot of time, so that's why I could do it. But yeah, when you get into the flow though, it's amazing what comes out of you. It's just like, what the hell did I just write? Like, and it's so fun.
yeah. A
Yeah.
hundred percent, 100%. And it really does require us to check our egos, let our egos be put to the side and kind of take a back seat for a moment and really just let that, let ourselves and let the love that we have for our art to come through.
Yeah.
I think is so important and such an important piece.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
love kind of closing and wrapping up our beautiful conversation with this like one question where if you can kind of sum up like just one piece of advice, whatever feels like true right now, not one word, but like one piece of advice to those that are tuning in and listening, what what comes to your mind? What comes to your heart?
I have been so much on this journey in the last year that the biggest advice that I could give to people, and with everything that's going on outside of our world right now, and you know the chaos with politics or whatever is going on that's stressing a lot of people, is that you are bigger than your circumstances. This is the thing that I have learned over and over and over again and again. It was layers where there's nothing outside of me that is bigger than who I am. And when I can let
Mm,
things outside of me just be what they are without, you know, making them about me, then I can truly see who I am. You know, I can truly see my inner peace and develop that inner world inside of me, right? But it's kind of like there's a discipline that needs to happen of really wanting to build that inner world inside of you despite whatever is going on outside. And so yeah, for people to just, it is time, I believe, to stop just fighting so much with everything that, you know, that's injustice or whatever, and just know that everything that bothers you outside of you is really just your chaos that you haven't dealt with inside of yourself. You have now to take the responsibility, be your own parent, and go into your own darkness so that you can see the light coming in and also can see the light that is outside, and make things less big things, and things that are kind of like, because people are going to judge a lot of things as being wrong, but nothing is really wrong once you get that you're the only one who's having that perspective, and you're the only one who's letting things bother you too. So but that needs to happen inside first. You need to see what's going on inside of you, what's bothering you inside of you. So yeah, and in a nutshell is like, you are so much bigger than whatever and whoever is outside of you, always. That's my 2 cents, I guess.
I love it so much. And I also, you are such a beautiful soul on this earth. And I invite those that are really listening and tuning in that have just resonated with you to follow you, to purchase your book, to just experience more of your wisdom. This is such a small little fraction, and so the conversation, the experience doesn't have to stop in this moment. If there is that pull that you're feeling, trust that, trust that guidance that you're receiving in this moment too. And so yeah, Ellie, I'm so grateful to you for this conversation. So much love for you and for being here. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media, and we'll see you in the next episode.